everybody, and welcome to the Podathon. We're very happy to be with you today, and it's brought to you by Make-A-Wish. If you'd like to make a donation today, please make sure that you click that QR code right in the corner, as well as go to thepodathon.com. My name is Spencer Jowitz. I am one of the hosts of the Virtual Cantina Network, as well as one of the admins for the Celebration fan page, and I'm brought with me today our programming director, Mr. Mark Von Owen. Mark, how are you?
Hi guys, hello there, and happy May the 4th. Very excited to be here on the Podathon.
We're very excited, and we're very excited to have a very special guest with us today. This gentleman has quite the resume, starting back with the saga back in episode 2, Attack of the Clones, and has been involved with just about every single live action property, not only within the Star Wars universe, but also within the MCU as well. So I'm very, very excited about this. So without further ado, let's bring on our guest from ILM, Todd Vaziri. Todd, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you all?
I am doing fantabularific, as they say. Happy May the 4th.
To you too.
So we have a whole slew of questions for you today. We're very excited to have you. And so let's jump right into this. So for those who don't know you, where are you from and where'd you go to school? What's your background like?
Well, I grew up in Chicago, suburban Chicago. Never in a million years thinking that I could possibly do anything related in the entertainment world or the movie world. And I just could not believe my good fortune and good luck to make it in Hollywood. So, but as a kid, I loved movies. I loved photography, and the dream was always to try to do something in movies one way or another. If we had sound design or editing or directing or visual effects. I was able to go to Northwestern University, the film program there, which was really fantastic, not only for the film, but for just general liberal arts education. And then one day I was like, I just have to go for it. And I packed up my car and drove out to Los Angeles and tried to get a job. And luckily somebody gave me my first big break. And, the rest, as they say, is history. So
That's amazing. What was that first big break? Because I see on your IMDb page, the first thing on there was Hercules: The Legendary Journeys. Was that the one?
That is in chronological order, but I joined that later in my career. There was a medium-sized visual effects company called Band from the Ranch Entertainment that was in Los Angeles, medium to small, run by Van Ling and Casey Cannon, who worked on some of the biggest movies of all time with Jim Cameron and ILM as well. And they decided to go out on their own and run a small boutique visual effects and animation house. And I had been writing about visual effects long before I took that drive out to Los Angeles, and doing my own visual effects as well. And somehow Van got a hold of my writing and said, I think I'm gonna. Would you like to try out some software with us and let's do a 6-week trial to see if you want to do some shots for movies. And I was like, yeah, I think that sounds like a good idea. And I had a really good time there for several years. And then I moved on to other shops as well. So I'll always be grateful for Van for giving me my first big break. You'll find that when you talk to folks in Hollywood, like you have to know your stuff. You have to be prepared. You have to be on time. You have to know what you're doing. But usually it requires a benefactor, a mentor, somebody who opened that door for you to get things going. And for me, it was Van and Casey.
That's amazing. So what kind of movies inspired you? Obviously, we're all fans. We're all, I call this the era of the geek because everything that was like our childhood is cool again, which we thought was cool back then. But what inspired you to become who you are today?
Oh, that's a really good question. I mean, growing up, I was maybe a bit of a mainstream normie. I mean, the mainstream action science fiction movies of the time were that was my jam. The films, particularly of Jim Cameron, Steven Spielberg and Robert Zemeckis, and of course the Star Wars trilogy were deeply inspiring to me. And not only just because of how amazing they were and how they sparked my imagination, but I wanted to get into the mechanics of like, how are these pieces put together? What is the alchemy? What is the chemistry of getting a bunch of actors, getting cameras and building sets, editing and sound? How do these all work together to create something that gets people in the theaters and gets them cheering and gets them to, emotional and coming back for more with the sequels and franchises? I wanted to know how that all worked. And that's what led to my study in film.
Absolutely incredible.
And it sounds like you. Oh, go ahead, Spencer.
Please. Oh, I just want to also say, plug out. This is they're absolutely fantastic, and we're going to continue to talk with Todd. I just want to plug again. We're doing this for Make-A-Wish. Please click that QR code. Go to the Podathon.com. Make a donation today. Really great raffle prizes if you make donations as well. But thank you very much for everybody who have donated already. And let's continue this. This is absolutely fantastic. I love like the behind the scenes type stories and also what inspires the artist behind of what we love. Because a lot of the times I found that it's the same exact thing. It's what triggered our love and our passion that we want to dig deeper and even going down the rabbit hole, if you will, to be more involved in that sort of scenario. But
I was going to ask Todd, as a fan of the original trilogy, was there a thought in the back of your mind at some point, I will be at the ranch, I will be working at Lucasfilm, I will meet George Lucas, or did you just kind of find your way there throughout? Because you had numerous credits before you got to Attack of the Clones. Tell us a little bit about like what that journey was like, starting in digital effects and then eventually getting to ILM.
Yeah. Well, to answer your first question, absolutely, positively not. Like to be able to contribute to a movie, any movie at all, in any way, shape, or form, being an extra in the background or making one sound effect or one something. No, never in my entire life did I think that could happen. When I remember starting with at that job I was telling you about at Ben from the Ranch, doing my first shot, which in hindsight, they threw me in the deep end of the pool. It was a paint out shot from a movie called Polly, about a talking parakeet, where in certain shots they used a real parakeet and they kind of puppeteered the parakeet's legs to indicate, like something was happening with the parakeet. So the puppeteer was slightly in frame, and also the rods that were attached to the parakeet's legs were in frame. So my job was to paint out the rods and the puppeteer. That is not easy. That is not easy. That was not easy then with the tools that were involved. That is not easy now. It's relatively more straightforward, but it takes a lot of craft and skill to do that kind of thing. If anybody's used Photoshop, it's like, okay, I could get one frame looking absolutely beautiful where I wanted to paint out something that I didn't want to have in the picture that I took. That's great and all, but film is 24 frames per second. And so that's a lot of frames. And if it's like a 5-second shot, that's a lot of frames you have to paint. And if anything is changing in the shot, let's say the thing in the background, it's trees blowing in the wind, or the puppeteer was moving around and casting a moving soft shadow across the actor or the bird, how do you deal with that? Well, that was really, really hard. So I was thrown into the deep end of the pool, and I spent a long time on that shot, and it turned out okay, but still. And everything got, it was always a process of learning and learning and learning. I worked on a lot of fantastic projects in Los Angeles for, I think it was 4 or 5 years before Industrial Light and Magic was looking for people, looking for compositors, because I'm a trained compositor, for Attack of the Clones. And even when they had that call for artists, please apply here. And I guess I technically qualified, but still in the back of my mind, I'm like, this is never going to happen. I should probably try. This is never going to happen. So I did it. I did interviews. I sent in my demo reel, and either by clerical error or they saw something in my reel that would be valuable to the company. I was able to join, and a few weeks later moved to San Francisco, and I was being turned over sequences from the droid factory in episode 2, which I could not believe.
That's amazing. How many NDAs do you have to sign in that circumstance?
All the NDAs, any NDA that you could think of, times 10.
Yeah,
there's probably an NDA for the NDA.
Absolutely. I shouldn't have even said that there are. No, I mean, you talk about like secrecy and wanting to keep, we're working on these projects sometimes for years.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole point is to make something, to work really hard on something special, a Star Wars, an Indiana Jones, a Captain America, whatever. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people are working very hard for sometimes years to make this little thing. And then it's theirs up until that point. And then the wonderful thing about movies is that it gets released, and it like, now it's yours. We hope you enjoy it. We hope you like it. Until that time, we all have a vested interest in keeping those secrets. And so it's not hard at all to maintain that kind of integrity to the process, because we all remember what it was like seeing these movies for the first time as kids, and seeing Empire Strikes Back, when Darth Vader makes a big reveal, spoiler alert, when he says, "No, I am your father." Now, how much less interesting would that have been if we all knew it going in, or if somebody had leaked it, or, the expectations were there? We remember how precious that moment is and how it sparked our imagination. We're trying to do that for every single project. So keeping secrets and stuff like that, it's not hard at all. It really isn't.
When did you have the epiphany that you were like, oh my God, I'm working on Star Wars?
First off, walking the halls of ILM and seeing, I was a bit of a filmmaking nerd, so I knew like the names and faces of several legendary ILMers. And the team that I was on for Attack of the Clones was led up by Dennis Murin and Ben Snow. They were the visual effects supervisors. Now, if anybody's familiar with the world of visual effects, one of the big names is Dennis Murin, one of the most historic innovators in Industrial Light and Magic history. To be sitting in a room watching him critique shots and talk about what's important about a shot, and what, here are the 5 most important things we need to do for this shot, and here are the other things that we don't need to be concerned about. Sitting like with him and having him critique my work and learning from him on week number 2, that was like, okay, this is to me Star Wars. This is joining a legacy of extremely well thought out creative people who just want to make really, really cool stuff. That's like maybe the touchy feely answer. The second one would be probably when I did my first lightsaber on Attack of the Clones. That's
awesome.
You're like, all right, I'm making a lightsaber. That's pretty
cool. Do you remember
cool.
what character you made the lightsaber for?
It was for Anakin. It was for Anakin and Obi-Wan after they got off of one of the drop ships, and they're running to confront Dooku, and they're running on the platform, and they're tiny little digital doubles, and they had tiny little lightsabers. But still, I did those little lightsabers, and
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Talk about getting thrown into the deep end. Wow, that's incredible. So did you get to interact with George Lucas at all while you were on set or behind the scenes or anything?
With the, every director is different, has a different style, and you don't get much more embedded into the Industrial Light and Magic visual effects world than George Lucas was on the Star Wars trilogy. So he was at ILM all the time, but when you're a lowly artist, and there's a chain of command, there's the leads and the sequence supervisors and the visual effects supervisors. There's random occurrences. I mean, he'd be walking around, I'd be standing behind him in line or in front of him in line for coffee. It would happen all the time. And then near the when I the most collaboration I had with George was for a special project that we worked on with Stephen Colbert for a green screen challenge Star Wars project that George wrote a bunch of dialogue for, and myself and Tom Martinick were visual effects supervisors for. That was our biggest collaboration between me and him. So that was kind of cool. But with directors, sometimes directors are embedded within ILM and are in person, and sometimes not. But we want to make sure that every director feels like they have that they're part of the process, and we feel like we're part of their process as well. Because in the end, we're all storytellers, and we all just want to tell the best story we can with pictures and with sound and movement. So we're all as long as we're all on the same page, it's going to be a great collaboration.
I see the Colbert Report item on your IMDb, and I was actually thinking in the back of my head, do I ask about that? So I'm so glad you brought it up, because he's the funniest. It is funny to
see, a very big Star Wars fan, Wars fan.
He's hosted a number of the panels over the Celebration in the last couple of years, so it doesn't surprise me that they grab the people who love it the most. So fantastic.
We can sniff each other out. Like, the nerds find each other, which is great. Like, I think we need to keep this golden age of like pop culture, geekdom, fandom that we're in. Like, Bad Batch this airs on Saturday, so we'll say just ended. It's today as we're recording, it's the day. And X-Men is going great, and we have a whole cinematic universe from Marvel, and Star Wars is continuing. It's kind of amazing. But even looking at your time at ILM in the early aughts, I'm looking at Mission Impossible, Harry Potter, Pirates of the Caribbean, War of the Worlds, and you mentioned numerous directors. There were a lot of people coming through ILM to get their visual effects done. And I'm sure you must have crazy, crazy stories from any of those movies. Do you have a couple that stand out in your mind, or a director that you got to collaborate with closely?
Watching Steven Spielberg work, when particularly War of the Worlds, and how he, one of the things you'll hear from folks who are on set with him is the way he collaborates with the set designers and the actors. It's one thing to do that part of the job, but it's another thing entirely to work with visual effects. And granted, he was collaborating with Dennis Muren and Pablo Hellman, people who he's worked with for many, many years. But War of the Worlds was the post-production timeline was extremely tight, compressed schedule. So we were moving 100 miles an hour the entire time. And watching him illustrate what was important to him about the tripods, how they would blast their beams, how we would draw the eye from one part of the frame to the other. Just really getting down to what is the point of this shot? What are we supposed to feel at the beginning of the shot and the end of the shot? And I don't expect any director to know any of the technical terms that we use in visual effects and animation. Absolutely, positively not. I do want to hear, personally, I want to hear what emotions they want to get out of a particular shot. We then translate it into explosions, fire, sometimes quiet, sometimes smoke, just all of these, all the tools that we have at our disposal. I want to know, what do they want to get out of the shot and how it pieces together with the next shot and the next shot. So seeing Steven like comment on our shots and say, no, don't worry about that. Don't worry about that. Just, this is the most important thing. And you really have to nail this thing. The way the fear of the crowd, let's say in the initial reveal of the tripod in the town square in New Jersey, when if you watch that sequence again, it's heart pounding. And it's because he's designed all of these like moments of discovery, fear, and then maybe even a break, and then a breath, and then another like ratcheting up of the intensity. How does that manifest itself with our visual effects? How clear did we want to see the tripods, or how mysterious did we want it to be at the time? Just seeing all that stuff happen in real time with us in production, I'll never ever forget that. It was so illuminating. And I mean, my favorite shows are the ones where we learn more about filmmaking through the collaboration with the directors and the producers. Those are the ones that I love the most.
It's very intriguing, especially considering the fact that some of the most recent work that you have worked on has been as part of the Mandoverse in that sort of capacity, when you're dealing with somebody who is so entrenched in, first and foremost, the animation world, and obviously talking about Dave Filoni, starting off with what he did with Last Airbender, then moving on to working on Clone Wars and Rebels, obviously Bad Batch, and everything going from there, and obviously the live action stuff that's going on. When you have somebody who is like a Dave, who also will storyboard like on a napkin, or how helpful is that with what you've done? And do you have any great anecdotes of some of the projects you worked with Dave?
Because I've been on the feature film side for so long, Dave and I have not crossed paths that many times. Sure. But I'll take your question from a different point of view, where when we do get to work with the director, again, I want to stress, we do not expect our directors nor demand that they understand the ins and outs and the technical aspects of of how we do things. I just worked on, or a couple of years ago, the Dungeons and Dragons Honor Among Thieves, and we worked with the directors who previously had made Date Night, a game night rather, which had a few visual effects, but nothing to the extent that Dungeons and Dragons was going to have in it, which wall-to-wall visual effects, creatures, animation. And they collaborated with visual effects supervisor Ben Snow. And by the end of the show, they became experts, basically. They knew how to direct visual effects. They knew a lot of the terminology. They had a very good sense as to what was easy and what was hard. And it made it easier for them to express how to do it, and also to prioritize. I say that only because, like I said, I want to know what the emotions are that you want out of a scene. So when you get somebody like a Dave Filoni or a James Cameron, where I was lucky enough to be on the Avatar team, who not only gets the artistic emotion of a scene, understands their goals extremely well, but who also knows the ins and outs of animation, knows all the technical terms. I mean, Jim Cameron, one very true thing about him is that has been said about him is he could pretty much do almost anybody's job on the film better than they can. And I wish it was hyperbole. It's kind of not. And in it, well, like, and then Dave Filoni's same personality type and same skill sets, particularly with his knowledge of Star Wars, not only the deep knowledge of through his collaboration with George of the reasons why things were done in the first 6 movies, let's say, but also taking Star Wars to new levels and new heights, and taking all that we do know about the mythology and continuing it forward and making new branches on that beautiful tree that we already have. So it's that those kind of collaborators, it's super exciting.
Yeah, I'm loving we call it the Filoniverse. I'm loving all these shows. Our network is, we do recaps and discussions and watch-alongs, and between Ahsoka and Mando and Boba Fett, we've been well fed over the last few years, and it looks like you've worked on all the stuff that we're talking about on a weekly basis. Do you have any favorite either moments or scenes that you've done in particular that you're especially proud of from the latest run of shows? Because there's a lot to choose from. Let me tell you that they've all really delivered for us.
I've been, like I said, I've been mostly on the feature side, but I did come in on a couple of the shows, and I helped out on the sequence from the end of Book of Boba Fett when our hero gets his new ship and is trying it out and realizing how much speed and energy it has, and he goes through a lot of familiar areas of Tatooine that we all know and love. I was very proud of being able to help out on that. It just just came in a little bit of a 911 kind of a thing, but those shots were really fun to work on. Yeah, I'm sure you know the sequence I'm talking about.
Oh yeah, we would say it's Wizard.
Yeah.
those scenes scream like 80s muscle car trying out Grease Lightning for the first time. You went like some like hairband playing in the background, and it was just like, you remember it. It's visual. I mean, obviously, everyone, we got the first reveal of the N1 in the hangar. All the prequel fans were like, "Oh my god, it's the N1!" And then seeing it in action, souped up, it was just breathtaking.
Yeah, I mean, and for us, like, you're talking about the emotion of a scene, that was about the energy. There are callbacks. Yes, there's references. Yeah, extremely deliberate. But if you had not, hopefully to a first-time viewer who maybe doesn't have the rich knowledge of Star Wars, they would just be like, "Oh, okay." They get the point of the scene, which is new car, different energy for this vehicle that this character that we've seen from so far. And that's the kind of thing we were trying to give with that scene of it, the ultimate test drive, if you will. Yeah.
And you mentioned you worked on the features. I see the whole Disney slate in here from Star Wars. And you're from the original prequel time period. What was the transition like going from prequel George ILM to Disney, the new Disney? I will say trilogy, but there's 5 movies. That whole time period. What did you find to be the biggest change between the two?
Well, I mean, it was very much a concerted effort, particularly starting with Force Awakens, where we're going to be taking the iconography and the stories and the characters that we know and love so well, but we are going to give it a new spin. We are going to, from like a visual, let's say, just to say from a visual point of view, because that has to do with like what I do every day. What if the Star Wars movies were happening in real life and were captured with real photography? Because there's an very much a fantasy aspect to the original trilogy and the prequels, but we wanted to push that to the next level, and that means some of the iconography that we are so accustomed to, with like lightsabers and how X-wings and TIE fighters turn and move and how all these things happen. What would happen if we took them in a slightly more photoreal direction? So, like, just on a tiny thing, because we were talking about lightsabers earlier, that meant rethinking how we deal with lightsabers, and the techniques that were used on the previous 6 films. We're going to do something a little bit different, particularly with the actors and lightsabers in the first 6 movies. Were fairly consistent. Maybe the 1977 movie being the outlier, because a lot of techniques were attempted for that film and were discarded, and so it's a little bit more around over the map for the look of that one. But with the exception of one scene in Attack of the Clones and then a couple of the CG lightsabers for Yoda, the lightsabers don't actually put out any what we call interactive light. They don't cast light on the actors because those sticks that they use on set are wooden sticks. They are not casting light. Well, decades later, we now have the ability to give the actors props that actually emit light and could actually be used with the sword play, with stunt play, and safely. So J.J. Abrams and the whole team, and Roger Guyette, the visual effects supervisor of Force Awakens, and the stunt coordinators and the props people, they all developed these amazing props that would cast interactive light. Now, right there, that's a new direction for how a lightsaber looks in the Star Wars world. Not to mention the fact that Kylo Ren's lightsaber is just completely different than everything else. So you remember I was saying in episode 2 when I made the little lightsaber effect, that was extremely straightforward and extremely simple compared to the elaborate effects that we do for these new films with just a lightsaber. Well, it's much more elaborate. It's much more photoreal. And we tweak the design per film and even per shot. But and sometimes there's a design philosophy that's slightly different between each of the films. It's super fun. So it's just so great to take the stuff that we know and love, and put it in a new direction. Rogue One was a slightly different case because the events of Rogue One take place, like, they literally lead up to the original Star Wars. But stylistically, we weren't going to make a movie that looks like Star Wars. This is a movie directed by Gareth Edwards and shot by Greg Fraser. They wanted to. There's a distinctive style there, and they didn't want to have that tied directly into Star Wars because I don't know if people would be able to handle a feature film that looked exactly like Star Wars at the time from a technical lighting standpoint, for example. So our goal on Rogue One was to build a scene around everything we know about Star Wars and have it be reminiscent of our memories of seeing Star Wars, if that makes any sense. Not the technical material, we wanted our Star Destroyers to look like the Star Destroyers we remember from the original trilogy. But it can't mimic exactly how they look in those the original trilogy, because there would be a photoreal discontinuity between the style that we're now in a 2016 feature film. So it's a lot to wrap your head around, and it's a lot to make it. We want it to be satisfying. We want people to go, "This is Star Wars." Now, what is Star Wars to everybody is slightly different. We get into these the hours long, days long arguments about what is Star Wars, or why doesn't this feel like the laser blast, the this or that. We talk about it all, and we talk about it to death, and it all in service of when people are sitting there with their popcorn in the darkened theater, and hopefully will be inspired and rekindle either something that they had in their childhood or open their eyes to some creative landscape that they are not accustomed to. It's all in service of that.
Absolutely. Well, first and foremost, Todd, thank you so much for joining us today as part of the Podathon. And to those who like this or whatever, if you would like to make a donation, we have a nice little QR code right over there in the corner of the page. We'd like you to please consider doing that, or go to thepodathon.com. Mark, anything you'd like to say before we close out?
For everyone, check out his IMDb page and go take a look at all the movies and TV shows that he's worked on. And can we follow you on social media? Are you on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook?
Yeah,
we keep up with what you're doing.
I'm all there. I mean, the easiest is tvaziri.com, and or Google me. You'll be able to find it.
Gotcha. tvaziri.com. We will check you out.
Todd, once again, thank you so much for your time today. I know you have a busy slate going on with a whole bunch of stuff that's going on that we can't wait to be part of in the near future or the distant future or anything above. So once again, it's been quite an honor to be able to chat with you today.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you very much.